The punishment that brought us peace was upon him. The punishment that brings us peace is upon him. One of the most profound illustrations that I've read regarding this truth is from Humacia prison in Brazil. It came to light several years ago when Chuck Colson went down and visited Humacia prison. Chuck Colson was the director of prison fellowship ministry, and he visited prisons around the world. Many of you probably remember he was former counsel to President Richard Nixon as well. He was the hatchet man for Nixon, and Colson himself spent time in prison after Watergate. I don't know much about his life prior to Watergate, but I know that he had a conversion experience somewhere along the line. I had the privilege of meeting him back in 2004 before he passed away, 5 or 10 years later. A wonderful, great, strong man of God, bringing the gospel of Jesus Christ to prisons around the world. Here's what he wrote about his visit to Humacia prison. He said, "It's a remarkable place. It was once a rotting building where prisoners were tortured, sometimes to death. Then 3 Christian men went to the government and asked permission to take over the prison in Humacia and run it like a Christian prison, to run it with Christian principles. And they didn't restrict it to Christian inmates," he said, "but you couldn't stay there very long without getting to know Jesus Christ." He said, "It's an extraordinary prison, different from anything any of us, meaning any of us on the trip when we visited, had ever experienced. Inmates opened the doors. Inmates have the keys. Security, as we understand it, is totally compromised. When an inmate needs to leave the premises to go to court, that inmate is escorted by other inmates. The staff is made up entirely of volunteers, and it's overseen by one judge who's responsible for all the prisons in that area, and that judge is very much supported with Humacia because the prison is incredibly productive and stable." Colson said, "It's the cleanest prison I've ever seen in all my visits. The cleaning schedule is established and carried out by the inmates. They do it themselves." One inmate expressed the reason. He said, "When I walked into the prison, they took off the handcuffs of steel and they replaced them with handcuffs of love." They assigned recuperados. They don't call them inmates. They're recuperating. And so they assigned the recuperados to a buddy system. And each new recuperado is assigned to an elder who loves the Lord. And at every single meal, they stand before the meal and recite the Lord's Prayer in Portuguese. When Colson said this in the article, it's what really grabbed my attention for this night. He said, "If anyone ever asks whether Christ makes a difference, then send them down to San Jose de Campos in Brazil to Humacia prison, and you will see that Jesus Christ makes a difference." One stat, for all those years when the Brazilian prison system was in shambles, they had a 74% reoffending rate when a prisoner was released. Humacia has released more than 300 inmates at the time that he wrote. They have had 12 come back. They have a 4% reoffending rate when the prisoners are released. Then he concludes by saying, "One inmate showed me their secret. This inmate was convicted for murder, but he was my guide through the whole prison, walking around with all of the prison keys hanging from his belt. He asked whether I'd like to see the maximum security cell. So we walked down a long hall of steel doors towards the cell. He said it used to be the punishment cell where they tortured people. He said we still use it for punishment. We have one inmate who is still in the cell." He took me to the door. He looked through the little peek hole. He said, "Are you sure you want to go in there and see this?" Colson said, I kind of puffed up. "I've been in maximum security holes all over the world. I've seen it all. I want to see it." He said, "Okay." He unlocked the door. He swung the door open. I saw a couple of chairs and a dim light. I saw some flowers on a table. And when I walked completely into the room through the door, to the right, I saw a hand-carved crucifix of Jesus Christ hanging on the cross. My guide pointed to the image of Christ and said, "He's doing time for the rest of us." He's doing time for us. For us. And on a Friday afternoon, some 2,000 years ago, the temple curtain was torn from top to bottom so that everyone would be given access to the Father, so that everyone would have access to His amazing grace, so that everyone would have access to His unconditional love. Everyone. Jesus, thank you for taking off the handcuffs of hell and replacing them with the handcuffs of love. And now may His peace that surpasses all understanding guard our hearts and our minds in His perfect love.